Alex and Morgan thought a late-night trip to Sam Club would be boring and simple. They never expected the aisles to stretch forever, the lights to flicker with a life of their own, or the shadows to move just behind them. By the time they realized they weren't alone, it was too late. Something inside the store had been waiting for them, and it would never let them leave. I went to Sam Club late one evening, after the store had emptied of its usual crowd. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unrelenting, making the aisles look longer, darker, colder than they should. At first it felt normal enough, just the quiet hum of a near-empty store and the occasional clatter of my cart against the polished floor. But as I walked deeper, I noticed something strange. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive, almost suffocating. It pressed against me from all sides, as if the walls themselves were listening. I told myself I was just imagining it, that being alone in such a massive space was enough to make anyone nervous. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, staring from the shadows between the shelves. I glanced toward the corners, where the security cameras hung, blinking their red lights like unblinking eyes, but I saw no one, no employee, no other customers, just me and something else, hidden. The aisles stretched endlessly, stacked high with bulk goods that now seemed more like barriers than products. Cereal boxes towered over me, plastic-wrapped pallets created walls I hadn't noticed before. Every step I took echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the shelves in a way that made it sound like someone or something was walking just behind me, keeping pace. I quickened my steps, convincing myself it was only the acoustics of the empty store, but my chest tightened with panic. Then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure, pale and hunched, standing at the far end of an aisle near the cleaning supplies. I froze, my cart rattling as I gripped it tighter. When I turned fully, there was nothing there, just a stack of giant detergent bottles. My pulse quickened. I whispered reassurances to myself that it was a shadow, a trick of the flickering fluorescent lights. But the thought didn't convince me. I pressed forward, trying to find the exit. The layout of the store seemed off. Each aisle led to another, unfamiliar and longer than it should have been. I was sure I had passed the same giant pallets 3 times already, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly how I had gotten there. My stomach knotted with unease. Something about the emptiness didn't feel natural, and the air smelled wrong, cold, metallic, and faintly sour, like a forgotten corner of a freezer section. Then I heard it, a low, wet sound, like dragging, echoing from the end of the cereal aisle. My head snapped toward it, but nothing moved. My breathing caught in my throat as the sound came again, closer this time. I wasn't alone, I realized. Not really. Something was moving behind the aisles, always just out of sight. I told myself to stay calm, that it couldn't possibly follow me, but instinct screamed otherwise. I turned a corner and froze. The electronics section was in front of me, row after row of blank TV screens reflecting my pale, tense face. Then I saw it in one of the screens, a shadowed figure, its face completely pale, eyes hollow and unblinking, staring directly at me. My heart leaped. I spun around, but the aisle was empty. Nothing but stacked boxes, carts abandoned in corners, and the endless hum of fluorescent lights. I stumbled backward, my fingers grazing a shelf. Something cold and sticky touched my hand, and I jerked away. My mind refused to accept what I had felt like a hand, but wrong. Too thin, too cold. The air seemed heavier, pressing against my chest. I tried to move faster, but the aisles twisted and stretched like a maze. I passed the same freezer section I thought I had left behind, even though I could swear I had never gone that way. The exit doors felt miles away, unreachable, as if the store itself was keeping me trapped. Then I noticed movement again, not far, but in a reflection this time, in the glass of a display case. Pale, featureless, staring at me, mimicking my every move, but with a grin too wide to be human. My stomach churned, and the lights flickered violently, bathing the aisle in moments of darkness. In that instant, I thought I saw dozens of shadows, tall and thin, moving in perfect silence behind the stacks of products, pressing closer with every flicker. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move, keeping my eyes fixed on the endless fluorescent lights ahead. The silence returned, but it was heavier now, almost suffocating, and I felt, rather than saw, that the figure or figures were still following me, their presence close enough to chill the air around me. A whisper drifted along the aisle, soft and wet, almost like breath across my ear. My name, drawn out slowly, chillingly, in a voice that was not human. I ran, pushing past pallets and carts, ignoring the ache in my legs. The aisle seemed to stretch farther with every step, and then, in the corner of my vision, I saw it again, the pale face, featureless and grinning, just behind a tower of stacked water bottles. I blinked, and it was gone. Only the echo of my heartbeat remained, pounding in the oppressive silence. My stomach turned, my hands trembled, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that whatever was in Sam Club with me wasn't going anywhere. I tried to convince myself I needed to calm down, to think clearly, but it was impossible. The store had changed. The aisles I thought I knew twisted and turned in ways that made no sense. Where I had expected the snack section, there were now stacks of giant paper towels, towering above me like walls, closing me in. Every step I took echoed loudly, far louder than it should, and sometimes I thought I could hear other steps, too soft, dragging, hesitant, but always keeping pace just behind me. I spun around, heart racing, and there was nothing, yet the feeling of being followed was unbearable. I reached for my phone to call for help, but the screen was dead. Not the usual low battery warning, completely dead, as if it had never been charged. Panic clawed at my chest. I couldn't call, couldn't alert anyone. I was completely alone, and yet I wasn't. Something was there. I could feel it. The air itself felt thick, almost suffocating, like invisible hands pressing against my skin. I moved faster, desperate to find the exit. My footsteps bounced off the shelves in strange patterns, making it impossible to tell if the sounds behind me were echoes or something real. Occasionally I caught glimpses of movement, shadows darting at the edge of my vision, figures crouching behind the stacks of soda, black shapes too thin to be human, shifting silently as if studying me. Every time I turned, nothing was there. But the feeling didn't leave me. It never left. I stumbled into the furniture section, hoping to find a clear path to the doors, but the tables and chairs had been arranged into a confusing maze. I could see through some gaps, but every route seemed blocked. And then I noticed the carts, dozens of them, lined up in neat rows, forming a narrow corridor that led deeper into the store. At first I thought they were still, then I saw them moving, slowly, inch by inch. Toward me I froze, my throat tight. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to obey. I could hear something breathing softly, low and wet, coming from the shadows between the aisles. It was deliberate, patient waiting. I swallowed hard and tried to peer into the darkness. The carts moved forward, not pushed by any visible hands, but the breathing came from them. The soft, wet sounds made my stomach churn. I realized with a shudder that whatever was inside wasn't human, or at least not human anymore. The lights flickered violently, throwing the aisles into darkness for a heartbeat at a time. In those moments I caught glimpses of tall, pale figures crouched among the carts, their heads turning slowly in my direction, eyes black and hollow, reflecting no light. I wanted to scream, but the air felt thick in my throat. My voice would not come. I was trapped in that paralyzing silence, the figures inching closer, waiting for me to make a mistake. I forced myself to move, inching backward along the furniture section. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if invisible hands were holding me in place. Then I noticed the floor sloping slightly toward the freezer aisles. It wasn't just sloping, it was pulling me, guiding me deeper, toward the hum of the refrigeration units. The sound was deafening now, like a low vibration that shook my teeth. I knew instinctively that I was being led somewhere, but I had no idea where. A shadow moved across the aisle ahead and I froze. My heart pounded in my ears as I realized the figures were no longer crouched. They were standing, tall, impossibly thin, featureless faces turning toward me with perfect synchronization. They didn't walk. They glided, silent and smooth, as if hovering just above the ground. My pulse raced, sweat dripping down my temples. I could see their long, pale fingers curl, reaching, waiting. I turned, desperately seeking the exit, but the aisles now formed a looping maze. Every path I took seemed to circle back, bringing me face to face with the same carts, the same shadowy figures, the same oppressive silence. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft and wet, crawling along the air near my ear. My name drawn out, slow, guttural, and unmistakably alive, not human. Something else, calling me, knowing me, waiting. I ran blindly toward the sound, hoping for the exit, hoping for anything that resembled safety. The carts moved faster now, shifting slightly to block my path, and the shadows behind them leaned forward, stretching unnaturally, their movements jerky and deliberate. I could feel their hunger, their anticipation, like cold hands brushing against my spine. My chest heaved and my thoughts scrambled in panic. This was no longer a store, it was a trap, alive, and I was the prey. And then I heard it again, clearer this time. My own voice, faint, distant, repeating my name, but I hadn't spoken. My throat burned, my lungs ached, and I realized with a terror that froze my blood, I wasn't running toward an exit. I was running deeper into whatever this place had become. And the shadows, the figures, the carts, they were all waiting for me at the end. By the time I stumbled into what I thought was the bakery section, my legs were trembling from exhaustion. My chest burned. My throat was raw from trying to call for help, but the store offered no relief. The air was thick and acrid, smelling faintly of burnt sugar, but it was wrong, too sharp, too sour, like decay hidden beneath the scent of baked goods. I glanced around, searching for any sign of normalcy, but the shelves seemed impossibly taller. The stacks of bread and pastries leaning in slightly, almost as if they were watching me. Something moved in the corner of my eye. I spun, heart hammering, but there was nothing, only a row of mannequins the store usually used to display aprons and chef hats. At first, I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. Then I realized they weren't mannequins anymore. They were hunched, thin shapes, standing unnaturally still, their faces hidden in shadow, but I could feel them observing me. Each time I tried to take a step forward, I caught glimpses of them shifting slightly, keeping pace with me. Their movements were jerky, almost mechanical, and I had the sinking feeling they weren't entirely human. I tried to move past them, but the aisles seemed to stretch impossibly long, twisting back on itself like the store had become a maze. I stumbled toward the freezer section to my left, thinking perhaps the cold could shock me into clarity. The hum of the refrigeration units was loud, reverberating through my skull, and the frost-covered doors reflected distorted shapes that weren't mine. I pressed my hand against the glass of one freezer, and a shock of cold ran through me. I blinked, and I could have sworn there were figures inside, crouching, pressing their black-eyed faces against the frost, staring directly at me. I recoiled, gagging at the thought. My rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that these were just reflections or smudges, but instinct told me otherwise. The shapes moved when I moved, aligning with me, yet never quite copying my actions. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, and caught sight of my reflection in a polished counter. It shouldn't have been there. The reflection was too pale, the eyes too hollow, and the mouth stretched into a grin far wider than humanly possible. I jerked away. The reflection mimicked my movements perfectly, but its grin remained, a sinister fixture, unmoving and watching. I ran down the next aisle, my panic escalating with every step. The shelves seemed to lean inward, narrowing the passage, guiding me towards some unseen destination. Shadows pooled at the edges, shifting and slithering, and I could hear faint dragging sounds from all around me. It was impossible to tell which direction the noises came from, above, below, or behind, but I felt them closing in. I clutched my arms to my chest, shivering despite the artificial warmth of the store. My mind scrambled. I had to escape. I had to find the doors, but the store refused to cooperate. Every turn brought me back to the same places, the same towering shelves, the same carts inching forward. And sometimes, just for a heartbeat, I could see glimpses of figures standing behind the frozen aisles, watching, waiting, their heads tilting in ways no human neck could bend. Then I saw movement in the mirrors lining the wall by the snack section. My reflection was gone, replaced by something taller, thinner. Its face featureless except for black holes where the eyes should be. It raised a long, pale hand, slowly, deliberately, as if testing me. I froze, paralyzed by terror. The thing mimicked me too perfectly for me to ignore, but the grin that stretched across its invisible mouth was wrong. It was malevolent. It didn't just mirror me. It anticipated me, and I could feel it thinking, calculating, enjoying my fear. The freezer doors shuddered suddenly, as if something inside wanted out. I watched in horror as shadowed shapes pressed against the glass, pale, thin, and impossible. Their limbs contorted unnaturally. They didn't move like humans. They were jerky, twitching, gliding against the walls, advancing with a patience that made my skin crawl. I stumbled back and almost fell, the cold and the fear unbalancing me. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft and wet, carrying over the hum of the refrigeration units. My name, drawn out, guttural, slow, not human, not alive in the way I understood life, but knowing me intimately, stalking me, calling me toward the darkness. My stomach turned. I realized with a sick, sinking certainty that I wasn't alone, that the store had never been empty, and that whatever followed me now wasn't waiting for me to leave. It wanted me inside, deeper, where the aisles twisted and the lights flickered, and where I could no longer tell reality from the nightmare the store had become. By the time I realized I was in the same furniture section again, I was exhausted, my body trembling, my mind fraying at the edges. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, thin shadows that twisted like fingers across the floor. The aisles had changed again. Tables and chairs formed walls I didn't recognize, blocking any clear path to the exit. I knew I had been here before, yet the layout seemed unfamiliar, impossible, as if the store itself had shifted to trap me. I could hear them again, the carts. At first they were lined up neatly, motionless, but now they moved inch by inch, sliding forward with deliberate patience. I realized with a sickening dread that inside each one were shapes, crouched and pale, black eyes staring directly at me. They didn't move like humans. Their limbs were too long, too thin, and their heads tilted at unnatural angles. I could feel their anticipation, the cold, patient hunger radiating from them. My stomach churned, bile rising. I tried to turn back, to find another route, but the aisles twisted and looped endlessly, forcing me forward. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, plunging me into darkness for brief moments, and in those flashes, I could see dozens of pale figures gliding silently just beyond the edges of the shelves. Their faces were featureless, yet I could feel their gaze burning into me, tracking every move I made. Each flicker of the lights seemed to bring them closer, inch by inch, and I could hear their soft, wet breathing growing louder, more deliberate, closer than it should be possible. I stumbled toward the freezer section again, hoping for a familiar landmark, any point of reference. The hum of the refrigeration units was deafening now, vibrating through the air and making the floor beneath me feel unsteady. Frosted doors reflected shadows that moved independently of my own, and I realized the shapes behind them were shifting, pressing against the glass with unnatural strength. Their long fingers scratched at the surface, tapping in slow, deliberate patterns that seemed to echo through my chest. I gagged at the thought. I tried to move faster, but my legs felt like lead. Every step forward was met with resistance, as if something invisible was holding me back. The whispering returned, louder now, surrounding me from all directions. My name, drawn out, guttural, wet, echoing through the store. I couldn't tell where it came from. Behind me, above me, beneath me, was everywhere, and nowhere, wrapping itself around my mind, clawing at my sanity. I spun around desperately, searching for any escape, and that's when I saw them fully. The figures were no longer crouched in the carts or lurking behind shelves. They glided, unnaturally smooth, toward me, tall, impossibly thin, their pale, elongated limbs brushing the edges of the aisles, black eyes fixed on me. Their movements were deliberate, almost lazy, yet I could feel the menace in every glide, every tilt of their heads. My chest heaved, every muscle screaming for me to run, yet there was nowhere to go. Then I tripped, falling onto the cold floor, and my hands brushed something wet. I jerked them back, gagging. It was sticky, like raw meat, and shaped vaguely like a hand but far too long, with jagged, curling nails. I scrambled backward, but the figures were closer now, gliding around the aisles, silent but inevitable, enclosing me like a net. The whispering intensified, now blending with a faint echo of my own voice. I recognized it immediately. It was me, calling my own name, distorted and wet, coming from somewhere inside the store itself. I pressed myself against a stack of chairs, trying to calm my shaking, desperate for a rational thought, but I couldn't breathe properly. The shadows stretched and moved with every flicker of the lights. Every aisle was a trap. I realized the figures were no longer trying to hide. They were enjoying my panic, my fear. Every twitch of my hands, every flinch, every shallow breath fed them. They moved with patience, slowly, deliberately, knowing I was trapped, knowing I couldn't escape. The emergency lights flickered one last time before dying completely, plunging me into darkness. The whispering was deafening now, coming from all directions. Surrounding me, the carts moved forward, slowly, purposefully, as if driven by an unseen force. The shapes inside shifted, uncurling limbs, stretching toward me, their black eyes glinting in the faint glow of the emergency lights. My heart pounded violently, my stomach twisted with fear, and I realized with absolute certainty that I wasn't running through a store anymore. I was trapped inside something alive, something patient, something that didn't belong in this world, and it had been waiting for me all along. When I opened my eyes, I was standing outside the Sam Club doors. The night was calm, quiet, and unnaturally still. The parking lot stretched before me, empty except for a few abandoned carts swaying slightly in the faint wind. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. I struggled to breathe, my lungs burning, and for a moment I couldn't remember how I had gotten here. The fluorescent lights inside the store glowed normally, and the sliding doors opened and closed automatically as if nothing had happened. I forced myself to step forward, my legs trembling. The store looked entirely normal. Shelves perfectly organized, products stacked neatly, no shadows lurking in the corners, no flickering lights, no whispering voices. I almost laughed at myself, relief washing through me. It had been a nightmare. It had to be. My mind tried to rationalize everything: the impossible aisles, the carts, the pale figures, but no explanation fit. I was just exhausted, delirious. That had to be it. I circled the lot slowly, still shaking, searching for signs of the strange figures or any of the otherworldly occurrences. Nothing. It was quiet. Safe, too safe. My phone, which had been dead inside the store, powered on immediately, displaying full battery and 0 missed calls or messages. Even the time was correct, like I had never been gone. I exhaled shakily, telling myself I would never come back. Then I saw the cart. It was sitting near the entrance, exactly where someone leaving the store would abandon it. But it wasn't empty. My stomach turned as I realized there were small, pale hands gripping the edges. They were thin, impossibly delicate, fingers curling toward the middle as if the hands were trying to hold on to something or someone. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs refused to move. My pulse pounded in my ears, louder than the night itself. I stared, frozen, as a small figure slowly emerged from the cart. Its face was featureless, pale as wax, black eyes unblinking and shining in the dim light of the lot. It tilted its head, unnaturally watching me. I knew immediately that it wasn't human, and yet, in some impossible way, it recognized me. My blood ran cold. I stepped backward, trying to put distance between us, but the parking lot seemed to stretch infinitely, like the world itself was bending to keep me trapped. Then movement caught my eye. Shadows shifted inside the store, just past the automatic doors. I could see faint outlines gliding across the aisles, tall, thin, perfect in symmetry, like puppets animated by some unseen hand. They didn't move like humans. They slid silently, smoothly, with purpose. My stomach dropped. Somehow, some way, they were aware of me outside, aware of where I was, and they were waiting. The small figure in the cart tilted its head again, and this time I saw its mouth. Not fully formed, but stretched into a cruel approximation of a grin. It mimicked me. Every small movement I made, it mirrored exactly, with that same impossible precision I had seen in the mirrors inside the store. My legs finally moved on their own, stumbling backward, but it didn't matter. I was still trapped in their awareness. The lot, the doors, the world itself they had folded around me, and I had no escape. I took a hesitant step backward and then another, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Logic failed me. Every step seemed to make the figure in the cart grow taller, its body elongating impossibly, limbs stretching, fingers reaching, and I realized with horror that it wasn't alone. From the store, more shapes emerged, gliding silently behind the glass, now visible through the doors. Black eyes, featureless faces, moving together, patiently, deliberately, and watching me as if I were prey they had been waiting for all along. I stumbled to the far end of the lot, pressed against the asphalt curb, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The cart moved forward slightly, gliding as if it had no wheels, following me. My own voice echoed faintly in my ears, distorted and wet, calling my name. I hadn't spoken. I could feel the store itself, alive, breathing around me, feeding off my fear. I forced myself to turn and run, heading for the dark highway beyond the lot. But every time I glanced back, the cart was still there, closer than it should have been, and the figures in the store windows followed my every step. I didn't stop until the parking lot was far behind me, yet I knew with a certainty that it wouldn't end. The store had seen me, remembered me, and now, in some way I couldn't understand, it had taken a piece of me with it. Even now, months later, I can't pass Sam Club without feeling it. Sometimes, late at night, I dream of the endless aisles, the carts inching forward, the pale figures gliding silently behind the shelves. And sometimes, when the wind catches just right, I hear a whisper, soft, wet, deliberate, calling my name, coming from somewhere that shouldn't exist. I know the store is waiting. I know it has not finished with me. And I know that one day if I return, it will finally let me inside.